From the beautiful city of Los Angeles, California, we bring you the Gimme 3 podcast.
Welcome back, cinephiles, cinema lovers, and movie appreciators to the Gimme 3 podcast, a series for cinephiles. This is the podcast where we choose 3 movies connected by one theme, and we're diving in deep, so take this as your official spoiler alert. I'm your co-host, Bella of Stratus, and while my wonderful co-host, Nicholas Ibarra, is away this week, I've asked not one, but 2 very special guests to join me on the show today. Please welcome 2 incredible creatives and movie enthusiasts who also happen to be my cousins. Introducing Melia and Henry Chendo. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're on very different schedules. You guys, we're all across the world right now a little bit. Well, I guess Melia specifically. It's
For sure.
where are you right now, actually, Mia? Are you in
I'm in Prague right now.
Oh my
actually,
god. Amazing.
It's 11:31 p.m. It's late.
No, you're the goat for that. For Henry and I, it's 2 p.m., so we're kind of just hanging out, 2:30. Well, I'm really happy to have you guys here, and we've got a really exciting theme and movie lineup for y'all today. This week, we wanted to choose a theme to celebrate Pride, and when Melia suggested the phenomenal queer icon of 90s cinema, Gregg Araki, I knew exactly what needed to be done. This was the perfect opportunity to check off Gregg Araki's iconic teenage apocalypse trilogy from my watch list. So today we're talking about Totally Fucked Up or Totally Fed Up, whichever you prefer, The Doom Generation, and Nowhere. I've been really excited to check out these films, and I'm even more excited to talk about them with you guys here on the show. So before we dive in, I am going to give a little bit of background to our listeners on who Gregg Araki is and kind of what this trilogy entails. But before that, I have a quick question for you two. I'm curious how and when you guys stumbled upon Gregg Araki's filmography. Can you remember the first film that you watched of his?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I was gonna say that I think it's really interesting and exciting to unpack these films with family because these films are so personal, and I mean, we grew up together, and these films are about like childhood and growing up and becoming an adult and facing the reality of adulthood and having adult desires and queer orientations in a certain social sphere. And Henry and I actually, we watched Doom Generation for the first time together in my apartment my sophomore year of college.
Wow. An unforgettable experience, I'm sure.
An unforgettable experience. Yeah, and I was first drawn to Gregg Araki by my roommate in that apartment. And she was an art history major and had this really impressive and extensive list of niche films with great soundtracks, and she had this eye for visual details that I really appreciated. And I watched these films the summer after my first breakup from a queer relationship, which felt
heavy.
very timely. Yeah,
Yes.
It was heavy, but it felt very timely. And yeah, I feel like I really appreciated like the specific lens that Gregg Araki was portraying queerness through.
Yeah, I love that. Henry, any Doom Generation? I guess
Doom
you guys watched
Generation
it
was the
together.
first.
Yeah.
We did.
What was your
That was huge.
experience of that?
Well, that was really interesting. I mean, that was like, I think the first time I'd visited Malia in New York. like alone. And
Yeah.
so it was kind of this like, watching Malia be an adult and like,
Yeah.
getting a little bit of foreshadowing from my own experience. And
Yeah.
Doom Generation was like, I mean, very intense, very heavy stuff, but
Yeah.
also I
Yes.
think kind of a different, for me, it was the first time I had experienced like something, how do I describe it? Like a queer film that I could like really relate to
Mm.
and that like kind of encapsulated a side of queerness that isn't, as like uh necessarily like happy and optimistic, but kind of
Right.
just like a rough and gritty and like violent view
Yes.
on this like identity.
Mhm.
And that was really, I think, an important thing for me to experience for sure.
I love that. Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
perfect description of the film as well.
Also, like, I feel like me and Henry's viewing experience of Doom Generation was really uncomfortable when we
for
were
sure. Yeah.
yeah, it was really uncomfortable because my roommate was like, "Guys, we have to watch this movie. It's so good."
Yeah.
And I remember we were all sitting on the couch in the living room, and there were just so many sex scenes that were like so graphic. And like I remember this one scene where the like third guy in the triangle
Mhm.
was um basically swallowing his own cum. And my friend and my roommate was like, "Guys, I'm so sorry." My roommate was like,
It's like that
"Guys, I'm
moment where you
sorry
all look at
that."
each other and you're
Yeah.
like, we're doing this. We're going with this. This is the point of
It's
no
cool.
return. Yeah, we either turn this off now or we commit.
Yeah,
Well, I'm proud
and
of
we
the
committed.
commitment because that was a scene I definitely wrote down in my notes as, "Oh my god, here we are.
Mhm,
Here we go."
mhm, yeah.
Oh, I love that. Yes, much to touch on in a Doom
Mhm,
Generation. I'm very excited to get into all of them, but that one specifically, as our listeners can tell, has struck a nerve with all of us. But
For
um,
sure.
well, here's before we get into it, I just want to give a brief look into the star of our episode today and his filmography. So if you're listening to this episode, chances are you've heard the name Gregg Araki. In fact, he may be back on your radar as of recently with his newest film coming up titled I Want Your Sex, starring Olivia Wilde, Cooper Hoffman, the great Philip Seymour Hoffman's son, and pop icon and it girl Charlie XCX. Crazy cast, very, very curious. Premiered at Cannes, so definitely will be seated in the theaters for that one.
yeah.
Anyway, Rocky is considered quite the trailblazer for the new queer cinema movement of the early 90s. He carved out a space for all the loud, messy, radically queer stories in cinema at a time when mainstream Hollywood was still playing it painfully safe. And after The Living End put him on the map in 1992, just 1 year later, he released the first film in what was retroactively titled Gregg Araki's Teenage Apocalypse Trilogy with Totally Fucked Up. Then in 1995, we got The Doom Generation. And in 1997, we got Nowhere closing out the trilogy. Together, they form a kind of spiritual trilogy, as they're not really linked by plot, but more so thematically and in mood and tone. And each film really explores queer teen angst, disillusionment, and the surreal chaos of growing up in a world that already feels like it's ending. They're also deeply Californian, grounded in LA's subcultures, and known for their bold sexuality, their surreal visuals, and of course, we have to mention the iconic shoegaze heavy soundtracks, which I'm sure we'll talk about more. I think it's safe to say that Araki's work is emotionally raw, visually unforgettable, and really unlike anything else from that decade. So,
Mhm.
without further ado, Malia, you want to take it away with our first film of the day?
Yes. Totally Fucked Up, which was released in 1993, is a very seminal film within the new queer cinema genre of the 90s. And it focuses on a group of queer teenagers who are navigating their desires in a very anxious social sphere that pathologizes their sexuality and refuses empathy for the lived experience of being anything but cis heterosexual and totally self-contained. I noticed that the experimental approach of this film celebrates this aesthetic of incoherence that is very specific to queerness and the inevitable quote-unquote failure of being queer in a culture that values heterosexuality, wholeness, and this indifference to the contagion of AIDS that is threatening the gay community and its liberation movement. And I think this time period is really important for the film, where the AIDS epidemic is really creating this very tragic atmosphere of death and disillusionment. People are really struggling to maintain hope and community in the face of that. And I noticed right away that the kind of campy and parodic documentary style of this film creates space for interruption in the narrative and these very comical juxtapositions where you'll have this really tragic moment that is then juxtaposed with an image of community and laughter and making light of this really difficult and like inevitably tragic situation. And I guess I'm interested in what you guys were thinking about the pessimism of this film and how at the same time this film reads as very campy and comedic, ironic, and focused on community and world building.
Yeah. Henry, you want to go first?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is one of my favorite parts of Gregg Araki's style is this juxtaposition that you're talking about between kind of pessimism and violence and, I mean, doom and
Mm-hmm.
the campiness. I think it really allows the in my mind, it allows kind of the life of the characters to shine through in a different way, where it's these, even though these are all kind of, or I'm talking about all of the movies in this trilogy are kind of this descent in some way into some kind of hell, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not really about the character. It's not really about like pity for the characters. This isn't supposed to be like,
Yeah.
sorrowful as much as like a story about life and a story about like a life that knows that it is like struggling and that it is kind of
Mm-hmm.
tortured. And yeah, I think the campiness really allows that to shine through where it's, people are dying and like there's crazy stuff happening. And then there's just like crazy, 90s LA lines being dropped. And,
Yes.
and it's
Mm-hmm.
a great
Yeah.
juxtaposition for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was immediately obsessed with this style and knew that I was going to love his other films based off of like I love the blend. You need the like comedy of like almost like
Mm-hmm.
comedic relief at times. And I think Gregg Araki has mastered that, honestly, of like he can do both at the most extreme level possible and
Yeah.
make it work seamlessly. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's so many funny moments in this. One of my favorites is when the whole crew is wandering the streets of LA at night together and they're talking about hot famous people and they bring up Tom Cruise and there's like an insert card that reads Tom Cruise, Rock Hudson for the 90s. and then someone says Mel Gibson and another card says homophobe a-hole. It's just like, and then I think, and then they say like Michael Stipe, the like lead singer of Ram or whatever, and it just says question mark.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
it's all, and like you said, it's all in the middle of like the chaos and trauma of these teens' lives. But
Mhm.
but those moments are so important because they are just teenagers talking about hot celebrities and drinking
Yeah.
beers and, you know, staying out all night. And it can be so relatable across generations in that way.
Mhm. And I do think the specificity of these cards, as you were saying, like the messages that are portrayed through this very specific aesthetic lens, and
Mm-hmm.
also the text that Gregg Araki includes in the films, um, just creates a lot of space for the viewer to resonate with the lived experience of these characters. I mean, at the time when I first watched this, I was 19 or so. Yeah, I was 19, and I felt like I hadn't experienced much, or I hadn't seen many films that really like captured my experience.
Right.
I think like the specificity of these things that we're talking about are really important because it just creates space for us to resonate with the characters and like what they're going through during this
Yeah.
specific time period, and like what cultural icons or contexts they're navigating.
Yeah.
And I think like we can really find through lines with like the current culture in interesting ways.
100%. I loved this movie. I can see why you love this movie so much, Malia, as well. I feel like it reminded me a lot of your art and style,
Oh.
like, and it's also so 90s, but feels very ahead of its time in a way that, like you said, I think makes it really, like, you can draw those lines. It makes it relatable for even our generation and future generations to come, I think.
Yeah, and I also feel like the incoherence of it, I don't know if that point was that clear earlier, but like right away, this film is portrayed as a student film. Like
Right.
it's it's filmed in this way that's like very documentarian, but like in a youthful way where like we're understanding that this is just a group of friends who are hanging out and like have a digital camera and like want
Yeah.
to document their experiences. And I really related to that. But
Yeah.
just seeing like the pauses in the first 5 minutes of the film, seeing the pauses and like where would they would stop and start again, and where they would include the moments where the characters fucked up what they were saying or like weren't exactly sure like how to articulate themselves, and then just kept going. I really appreciated that, and I think like that was just very relatable.
It's very real. It has like a sort of cinema verite style to it in that way. And I will say, while I loved the kind of hyper experimental, like pseudo documentary video diary style of the first half of this film, I really appreciated that the film quite literally started a more distinct narrative after a certain point. I think, you know, they have the insert card with the arrow pointing, narrative starts here. And
Oh
I think
yeah.
having both parts and the connection of both parts is actually brilliant because you can't really have one without the other. Like by the end of the film, I realized that I kind of needed those video diaries or interviewish clips of each of the characters to better and even fully understand them within the narrative. Those clips or personal biographies, whatever you want to call them, they give us so much insight into the characters at the beginning, so that when certain things happen to them within the main narrative, we already have that context of how they're feeling. We know their thoughts on love and sex and the state of the world. So, for example, when like issues in their relationships or friendships come up, we have even more of an understanding of how that specific individual feels, the other people feel like, and in comparison to the other characters involved as well. And I think it gives even more depth to their actions because we already know what they're thinking without them having to say it. I think it's really, really clever and beautifully executed in this film. And like you said, it totally has the student film vibe. Like I kind of another thing I loved about this is it made me feel like I was watching Gregg Araki create the film in real time. Like he's choosing his avatars and giving them backgrounds, personality traits, like trauma, beliefs, and he's drawing all the lines to each of their relationships. And it was almost like he's interviewing each of his characters to really get to know them before letting them loose, like run wild in his narrative. But that's why I thought it's so interesting. I'm curious what you guys think about placing one of the characters, Steven, as the man behind the camera, showing us this kind of like skeleton of the film and what's to come in the narrative section. I thought that was a really interesting choice.
I really appreciated his role and specifically how his presence was a part of revealing the relationships between all of these characters and the camera, and how these characters are interacting with camera and like the apparatus of film and like the phenomenon of film, and like how queerness is represented visually, because I think the like aesthetic mode of the new queer cinema movement and this movie is really important. Like the stylization is really important, and I feel like actually like pointing out the characters' relationships to the camera and like how the relationships to the camera actually like complicate the narrative and like add something to their experience is really interesting. Like how there is this moment in the plot where Derek finds Steven's film, which was recorded privately, and like disclosed these details about their relationship that he wasn't meant to hear. The apparatus and presence of film is actually important in like making the narratives of these people. I just really appreciated the intentionality of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hope this isn't too confusing, but on like a structural level, I found that movie really interesting. How like you have this character who is like literally doing the perceiving of all of these other characters in the story. And in doing so, like he's making it very obvious how the story is kind of fragmented, like literally and figuratively through these the like vignette style of storytelling. And yeah, I feel like just as a means of like achieving honesty when you're telling these stories, it's really interesting in contrast to the other two films we're going to talk about, like to have it be so kind of direct, like to be so direct about like this is a film, this is characters behind a camera. Um, I think it really changes the way that like we experience it, and yeah, definitely gives it more honesty.
Yeah. I love that.
Well, there was something about the way that this movie was filmed that I paid a lot of attention to just in my last viewing this past week that I didn't notice before. I noticed that there were a lot of shots of the characters from below, or
like low angle.
Yeah, there were a lot of shots of the characters laying down, like either they were having sex and the camera was like right there next to that. Like there was this shot of Derek and Steven where Derek was like, I don't want to have sex in front of the camera, and Steven was like, wow, like but it was like right there next to them. It wasn't this like idealized view from above. It felt like we were really a part of that experience and witnessing
like a found
it
footage
in this
home video kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I noticed that a lot of the shots were from below or from the ground.
Yeah.
I feel like the low angle was this way to capture these characters in this very like casual way where they were just like actually like hanging out on the floor and like chilling in their rooms and stuff, and like letting us bear witness to that in this casual lived way.
It's like a floor angle. It's like the definition of grounded. It's like the best way I could put it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And I was also thinking about this image of Andy, main character, James Duval, diving into the pool and falling into the pool, and how that image is so central to the film and its climax or falling action, whatever.
Right.
And I was thinking about the symbol of the fall and like how that's really important in portraying this inevitable failure, as I was saying, of queerness, and not a literal failure, but like this failure to meet the expectations of a disillusioned society, and how this aesthetic mode celebrates falling and failing and being on the ground and being carried down by heaviness in this way that's actually very beautiful.
I like that. I like that, like, even in the sadness of this film, there's a lot of beauty, like you're saying.
Mm-hmm. I also, okay, I'm gonna like chill after this.
No,
but
this is Malia's favorite movie, guys.
This is my favorite movie. This is my favorite movie.
That's what the podcast's all about. That's what we're here to do.
One of the reasons why this is my favorite movie is because I watched this about a month after I found Katie's Song by the Red House Painters, which is a fairly obscure song. I mean, I feel like I don't usually hear songs that I love in the films that I watch, and I watched this film in the same time period that I was really obsessing over this song and the Red House Painters, and I heard it like 15 minutes in and I screamed. I was so excited.
So
I was
crazy.
like, how is this happening?
You're like, this is my movie.
Me. I was like,
Yes.
this is my movie.
Oh, that's the best feeling. This was made for me. Yes, that feeling, it's unforgettable. It's an instant, it makes it an instant favorite for sure.
That was a very personal experience, but really made the film for me.
Yeah.
That's the power of music, and Gregg Araki gets it. I mean, music plays a massive role in all three of these films.
For sure.
Definitely.
Well, listeners, if you're curious about the soundtrack, the subject matter, anything we've been talking about in this, and you haven't seen it yet, you can watch Totally Fucked Up right now on Mubi, Canopy, the Criterion channel, of course, on demand, and I am sure you can find it at your local video stores. Definitely check it out and let us know what you guys think. Alrighty, Henry is gonna take it away with the second installation.
Yes. So the Doom generation, as we discussed, this was my first entry into anything by Gregg Araki. This was really huge for me, and I'm excited to talk about it. It was released in 1995, and it basically is the story of a bisexual trio that is, just figuring out their identities, figuring out their lives in the wake of some brutal violence that just seems to follow them everywhere they go. And it's really a crazy combination of, as we've been talking about, of this campy humor and of just like lighthearted kind of punk 90s attitudes with, exploding heads and all kinds of very dark and violent themes that I'm sure we'll get into.
Yes.
But yeah, I think for me, honestly, one of the things that stuck with, or the two things that have stuck with me the most for some reason about this movie are like the sets are so incredible to me, especially like the hotel rooms that they go in that are these monochrome colors. One of them is like a checkerboard, and the other one I remember is like kind of this dark red, and there's like a unicorn head as the
Yes.
mantelpiece. It's like a very crazy vibe. And then the music is very incredible as well. There's a few Babyland tracks on there that kind of introduced me into a whole new genre of, I guess like a combination of metal and electronic music. And yeah, that spurred kind of a whole creative direction for me.
I love
So
that.
yeah, very important movie for me.
Yes, important and personal. I love it. Yeah, so this was the first movie. Okay, so I was so mad at myself because I was trying to watch these in order, and I accidentally watched this film last because I got it
Oh, really?
confused. So I did not watch the trilogy in order as God intended.
None
But
of us did.
I know it's probably fine, but
I also didn't watch it in order.
you didn't watch. Okay, yeah. See, I mean, it's fine. But I will say, after I watched Nowhere before this, and after watching the Doom Generation, I feel like it did kind of make a difference because the Doom Generation feels like the perfect in between point between totally fucked up and nowhere. Like in this film, we're still grounded in kind of a version of reality in that this world somewhat looks and feels familiar, but at the same time, there's a heightened surreal quality woven throughout that just pushes it further and further from reality towards the full-blown absurdism of nowhere, which we'll get to later. um I felt like this movie was portraying the generation right after the apocalypse, like when civilization is still kind of lingering but hasn't fully evolved into something new yet, and it's kind of still holding on to the world before the world before it, even though that world is like crumbling before your very eyes with like violence all over and exploding heads and talking
Yeah.
heads, talking severed heads. But I loved it. I think this movie is a masterpiece. Everything is just perfectly in sync thematically, in its style and aesthetic, its storytelling and pace, and its performances. I mean, these are three powerhouse leads. Like all three of them are fighting tooth and nail to dominate the screen in every single scene in their own unique way. But the best part is that this battle, so to speak, doesn't disrupt the film. I think it actually elevates it. And that's because it also fits their characters and
It
they're
very
kind
much
of
mirrors
yes,
their
exactly. And they
vibe.
have the most like fucked up dynamic between the three of them. But it's all at the same time, it's such a beautiful, intimate dynamic and relationship as well, which I mean, that goes hand in hand. But yeah, I thought this was great. It was not at all what I expected, but it was even better. And I loved the kind of road trip movie aesthetic and kind of a Bonnie and Clyde if they had a third, and it was like really sexual and kind of perverted.
Yes.
I really liked what you just said about this being perverted because I feel like in a way Gregg Araki is encouraging us to just accept the fact that we are all perverted.
Totally.
Like we're all
totally. Yes.
We're all perverted. Like
we're humans.
We're humans. I mean, I feel like my experience of watching this informed like how I feel about the film. But like what I've really taken away from it was like how uncomfortable I was at certain points, how I didn't want to see certain parts of the film. The castration scene, which is something I have thoughts on, was very intense for me. And I remember I'm sure Henry remembers. I was very disturbed. I was very disturbed by that scene being followed with one of my favorite songs of all time by Slow Dive, Blue Skied and Clear. Amazing song. I just remember sitting on the couch watching this and being like, oh god, this is really perverted to be watching this with my little brother.
Yes. This inseparable part of the experience.
Yeah, that's kind of a key piece. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a wild movie to watch with family, and I mean, proud of us to come on here and discuss it with each other. Because it's so perverted, and it's also so disturbing, and it sneaks up on you. At least for me, I can't lie. That that ending, I feel like for the most part, it's very campy. Even like kind of reminded me of like Tarantino, like Pulp Fiction,
for sure. Yeah.
And it's still that gritty, violent, campy aesthetic, but then this climax, this ending is so horrific, and you don't want to watch it. You're sitting there like, I don't want to watch this. I hate this. I hate the way it's making me feel. And good old Gregg Araki then just leaves us with that. He's like, peace. That just happened. And and then that song comes in, and you're just sitting there watching the credits crying. Like, what the hell just happened? It's crazy. He's out of his mind for that. I wish I could have experienced the premiere of this film and been in the audience and seen how people reacted to this one. It makes sense that it's a cult classic.
Yeah, I think I needed to pirate like 4 episodes of The Office after the end of that one. It's like I need a comfort watch.
Yes, just brain
to
rot.
get over this.
Yeah. I think that's healthy.
For sure. I mean, it's so interesting. It's also like the killing of the kind of like sweet puppy dog character, or I don't know if that was your experience. For me, it was very much like this guy is like so this, I don't know, I don't even know the word. Just like such like a sweet and like curious fellow.
Yes.
And then to have him be like the subject of this like horrific torture at the end.
Yeah.
It's so jarring, especially when the other characters are set up as like very gritty, very violent. Like Xavier is this like, ambiguous, maybe serial killer or something. Like it really, and
maybe demon, honestly.
maybe demon.
I was like, this man came straight out of hell.
Yeah.
Just spawned in their car.
Yeah. And it feels like Jordan just feels kind of outside of it for most of the movie. And then, going from a passive role to the victim role is like very heartbreaking.
Totally.
Nice.
And shout out to his performance, because going from little moody broody Andy in Totally Fucked Up to this like timid little baby boy, the difference is astronomical. I mean, it's amazing range. So it's and that's what makes it just an absolute gut punch ending.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it felt like he was already castrated. Like the way that his character was portrayed, if you're thinking about it through this like dominant, like cis hetero lens of masculinity, like he was already castrated. And cutting off his dick and then forcing him to swallow it.
It's horrible.
It's horrible.
He is like the sacrificial lamb of all 3 of them, in a way. Like the one person you don't want harm to come to. Yeah, it's brutal. It's heavy shit.
I mean, it's interesting. I hadn't realized what you're saying, Malia, that like there is this like kind of foreshadowing of it in a very symbolic way throughout, where he is like, especially the scene where he's watching through like the hotel window, like his girlfriend having sex with Xavier, and you're just like, there's no anger, there's no like reaction to it, and it does feel, if we're looking at it through this like cis hetero lens, it's like he's this like weak man, and then there's this like alpha figure. And I think taking that from the symbolic to the literal is an interesting choice. But very dramatic, very foreshadowed.
I think it's interesting, because I kind of agree with you, Henry. Like, I didn't really kind catch that foreshadowing. I was very much distracted by the sexual chemistry between Jordan and X, Xavier. I thought
Yeah.
I was going to be watching them right off in the sunset together.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to go back and put those pieces together. I mean, yeah, I love that Gregg Araki made this film. You know, he says right at the very beginning, like, this is a heterosexual movie made by Gregg Araki, whereas in Totally Fucked Up, we got a homosexual film by Gregg Araki. And I love, like, the story behind this, you know, and I think it's just brilliant because he really did make the queerest straight movie ever. And like, the whole time I'm like, why are they wasting their time hooking up with Rose McGowan's character when they should just be kissing each other? Like, what are we doing here right now? I mean, I thought the sexual chemistry and, like, tension between Jordan and X was just, like, off the charts, and you're kind of just waiting the whole time for that to happen, and by the time it does, it's kind of too late in the most horrific way imaginable.
Yeah. It feels like Gregg Araki is edging us and then just completely cuts off our dicks.
Yeah. Castrates the audience. It's so
immediately.
true.
It's really intense. And I also have noticed a through line between James Duval's characters in all three of the films where he edges and becomes close to this point of reconciling with his queerness, and then something is exploded or cut off or killed, and he loses the ability to integrate that desire. Yeah, it feels like he always fails in his desire, or he always is met with misrecognition of some kind, or castration, or death, or whatever.
Yeah, and it's always at the point where you think that he has it in his hands. It slips through his fingertips.
Exactly. Yeah.
Poor James Duval.
Brutal. Brutal.
I also want to shout out Rose McGowan because her performance as Amy Blue is just out of this world. I mean, she is just a beauty, an icon, and just such a bitch, and I love it. I mean, she is so mean and has the best line delivery, and her bickering with Xavier is just, I could listen to it for the rest of my life.
It's so good.
It's so funny.
It's so interesting how she is like the barrier between these two men who you want so badly to hook up. And and she's also the one who, like, everybody in the story is trying to kill the entire time. It's really
She's causing all the problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the amount of time, like, how many times is it, like 5 times throughout the movie where there's a character who goes like, I'm gonna find her and I'm gonna kill her. It's like,
bitch. I'm gonna find her. And I'm gonna kill her.
She's got all these nicknames like Kitten, they call her Sunshine, Bambi, and which is also so funny because she is neither of those things. She is a scary woman.
yes.
I really appreciated how she's portrayed as having this very active and almost aggressive sexuality. Like, she's not just the object of the cinematic gaze, and she's also not just the third piece of this homosocial triangle. Like, she has this very active part of their relationship, and she is pretty brutal.
She controls it. She is the puppeteer of everything. That whole plot line of people thinking that she's their long lost love who ditched them is one of the funniest things ever. And I love that they had like iconic cameos, like Parker Posey popping up.
Oh my god,
And
yeah.
she's like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna lob his dick off like a chicken head.
So good.
She's just out of her mind. The costuming, I mean, it's brilliant. And I was actually reading this article, or this interview with Gregg Araki, and he was talking about they were asking him about, what was the inspiration to have all these icons kind of pop up as really random side characters. And he said that he didn't think of them as much as like stunt cameos. He really thought of them as kind of when you're dreaming, and people from, that you passed on the street or someone you watched on TV, like random, will just show up in your dream. And he gave the example of like Lindsay Lohan appearing in your dream or something. And, it's not even those people that it's never even really people that are necessarily important to you, but your mind has just like logged that, and now it's a part of the story that's happening unconsciously. And I just thought that was fantastic as
Yeah,
well.
that's so accurate.
Yeah. It feels like very surrealist.
Yes.
Like just random flows of thoughts and desires and images.
Absolutely.
But also not random. Also very specific.
That's true. Very calculated. I think I have gimme 3 favorite quotes.
Oh yeah. You know what time it is. It's time for some movie quotes. You know what gets me going? Quotes from my favorite movies. We're coming for you, baby.
One of my favorites, number 1. It's the first time that Amy Blue and Xavier are getting it on, and she notices that he has a portrait of Jesus tattooed on his penis, and she asks him why, and he says, so when I'm boning people, they can say, I got Jesus inside me. Sick.
So good.
So had to shout that out.
The Holy
My
Spirit.
second one has got to be Jordan and Amy have just had sex, and he says, don't you think sex is totally strange, just the whole idea of it? And she says, I think maybe it's more powerful than we'd like it to be, which I thought was really interesting. And he says, it's fucking trippy, that's for sure. And then she follows it up with, it's kind of like eating spaghetti. And he starts laughing, and he's like, why? And she just doesn't answer. And I just love that like series because, they have that really deep and powerful moment of, kind of recognizing the power that sex has over people and relationships. And then just as like you're kind of getting into that, they're like, but actually it's like eating spaghetti. And you're like, wait,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
'cause it
my
feels
number
like-
2.
Feels like he has this really complicated, ostracized kind of relationship to sexuality that's like pretty heavy, but then making light of it in that way is just so good.
Yes, exactly. And then my third one is from Xavier, and he says, suck my stump to a bloody lump. Just filthy,
So
filthy
good.
man.
Sushi.
But yes, that's gimme 3 favorite quotes from the Doom generation, all foul-mouthed and disgusting. So apologies to our sensitive listeners.
I don't know if they made it this far.
I don't know if you're still with us. Thank you. God bless you.
If you're still with us, you're a pervert.
Welcome back to the Gimme 3 podcast. Today we've been talking about Gregg Araki's Teenage Apocalypse trilogy. So far we've talked about Totally Fucked Up and the Doom generation. And now we're closing it out with the final chapter, Nowhere, released in 1997, starring our recurrent muse, James Duvall, We've also got an amazing cast with a lot of Gregg Araki's favorite players and more 90s icons. We've got Rachel True, Debbie Mazar, Nathan Bexton, Chiara Mastriani, Kathleen Robertson, Christina Applegate, Sarah Laze, Guillermo Diaz, Heather Graham, Mina Savari, Rose McGowan again, Shannon Doherty, Tracy Lords, so many more as well. This is just scratching the surface. Nowhere takes place over the course of one chaotic day in a hyper stylized Technicolor fever dream version of Los Angeles. We follow Dark Smith, played by James Duvall, a moody teen hopelessly in love with his bisexual and non-monogamous girlfriend Mel, played by Rachel True, who's also dating a girl named Lucifer. As Dark spirals through his own emotional apocalypse, we bounce between a rotating cast of disillusioned teens dealing with their own crises. We've got hookups, heartbreak, drug trips, televangelists, alien sightings, and even sudden death. Everyone's making their way to the biggest party of the year, Juji Fruits, but nothing about this day unfolds the way that you'd expect. This movie is part teen soap, part sci-fi horror, part MTV meltdown. It is the epitome of Araki's unique vision of the end of the world. I think it's so funny that we each had a different favorite, like no overlap at all. I asked Melia and Henry, okay, who wants to introduce what? Are we gonna have to fight for it? What's going on? And it was just so easy. We were each like, okay, I like this one, I like this one, and Nowhere was my personal favorite. So
Perfect.
it was perfect. I loved this movie. I think Gregg Araki has already given us some of the best production design and style or visual aesthetics in these other films, but the production design in Nowhere is just turned up to 1,000. Like it's off the charts. It is the most incredibly creative and vibrant and fun and beautiful. I love this style. I would love to create something like this one day. And then of course you bring in this kind of creepy alien sci-fi shit, which is my kind of thing. So I kind of felt the way that you guys have described, like Malia, for example, that Totally Fucked Up was made for you. I was like, this movie was made for me. It's
Awesome.
the one way I can describe it to our listeners, if they've seen them, was it reminded me of a perfect combination of Jamie Babbitt's But I'm a Cheerleader and Rocky Horror Picture Show, which are two of my all-time favorites. And, you know, it's got the queer sci-fi themes of Rocky Horror, but then the production design and kind of like teeny bopper dialogue, like teen soap vibe of But I'm a Cheerleader, which is just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, what did you guys think of Nowhere? Had you seen this one before, or was this a first time watch for y'all?
This was, for me, a first time watch, which was kind of a crazy way to come back. I haven't seen any Gregg Araki movies in like a solid, I don't know, 6 months maybe. And
Oh
this was
wow,
the
yeah.
first one that I watched like this week. And,
Nice.
and I was like, whoa, like, did I forget about how campy Gregg Araki goes? Because I think, yeah, this one's like really turned up to 11. But
Yes.
yes, lovely stuff. I mean, I think for me, my favorite part was probably watching Dark's relationship and just like this abysmal, like polyamorous relationship that just just doesn't function at all. And it's like so chaotic.
Yeah. So
Definitely
dysfunctional.
something I've like been around in New York. I feel like there's a lot of, this attempt at polyamory around me in New York. It's just like sometimes it goes well, but sometimes sometimes it's a bit one-sided. And
Sometimes it's
this was
messy.
a great, encapsulation of that.
Totally.
Yeah. I really appreciated the campiness of it and the irony and how it felt very performative. Like, I really appreciate characters feel performative in this intentional way, and I feel like James Duvall does that really well in all three of the films. But I loved his performance in this one. And I actually watched this film last night for the first time in like 2 years. This was the first film I ever watched by Gregg Araki.
Wow. Bold introduction.
First film. Yeah, bold introduction. I remember my friend was like, this was the one I watched first, so you have to do it in the same order.
Amazing.
Yeah. I loved the soundtrack. After I watched the movie, I had the soundtrack playing off Spotify as I was getting ready to go out.
Oh yeah.
And it was just so good. Like the first song by Slow Dive that comes on is just so dreamy, and I really love how Gregg Araki uses shoegaze to illuminate this very delusional, imaginary, teenage, apocalyptic feeling that resonates within all three of the films. But I think like the aesthetic of this film is so campy and so stylized, and I noticed it a bit more in coordination with the soundtrack. It was awesome.
I love that. Yeah, I was just drooling over the production design and costumes and makeup and everything in this film. Right? Like literally the first frame, the opening credits are like just stunning. It's this beautiful imagery of James Duvall's character, Dark, and he's naked and showering. It's so ethereal. He's in this like blinding white heavenly mist. It's like a shower in heaven. And I'm curious what you guys think of this character in this, because my initial thought, since I had watched this right after Totally Fucked Up, is that this is Andy in the afterlife. This is a depiction of him in heaven, and he's called Dark now. And he's, because we see him, and at first I was like, oh, okay, maybe not. But then I feel like throughout the film, I felt that even more, because there's this like theme of him chasing that grand love and still not quite getting it. And he's kind of just doomed to chase it for the rest of his eternal life existence, whatever this is. And on top of that, in between that, there's this like constant quotes or like moments in dialogue where he's like, I feel like an alien, or like, I want to leave this planet. And so I'm like, oh, are they on a different planet? Like, is this a different reality and universe of Andy? And so I don't know. That was like kind of my first thought. And I was like, oh, maybe these are more connected than we thought.
Yeah.
Just now, as I was commenting on the first song of the soundtrack being a Slow Dive song, I realized that the last song of Doom Generation, the film after Jordan is castrated and killed, is another Slow Dive song. So there's some coordination there as well with the different characters and with this very ethereal soundtrack.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. I also think, I mean, this isn't about the characters, but the sets feel kind of heavenly, or even like almost like Truman Show-esque. Like the way that all of the bedrooms are like so huge and grandiose and like ultra stylized, and like that shower shot in the beginning, it like comes down from the ceiling and it makes it look like he's just in this like huge like white
So
like
true.
room, and then it's just this little shower. There's all these like really bizarre, like gigantic, really grand sets that are just so out of place in this like otherwise like kind of like rough
that's
aesthetic.
such a good point.
And then and I feel like the campiness as well. It's like these characters aren't like fully real. They're like almost like, there's something like off and like goofy and light about all of it. That, definitely this strong sense of unreality for all of it.
And I feel like I even realized that in there's another great set and scene with Mel the girlfriend, and she's wearing this, or she's set against these, like, it's almost like Twister. Like, she's got like this Twister
Mhm.
background on a giant wall. It looks freaking huge. And her, she's wearing overalls that match, which is just amazing. And she's kind of like blended in. And then the camera turns and you realize you're just in like a really small bathroom. But with like so it's
Oh
similar to what
yeah.
you're saying. It's like, wait, what is this giant space? And then they're like, just
Mhm.
kidding, we're here. So it
Yeah.
totally feeds into exactly what you're saying, Henry, of like messing with your mind and your eyes. And I mean, this movie feels like an acid trip on all fronts, honestly. Like visually, even in the story, like we jump around to so many different characters that at times I was confused. I was like, wait, what am I doing right now? What's going on? Oh yeah, we're with this person now. Okay. Like even when they were playing they were playing some kind of fucked up hide and seek after taking ecstasy in like the ballpark.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
we
that's
like
crazy.
cut to James Duvall's character, or maybe it's Montgomery. I think it's Montgomery, and it's right before he gets abducted by the lizard alien in the locker room. And I'm just getting so, throughout the film, you're just getting so caught up in the dialogue and what's happening with each character. And like, I'm so stressed about Jordan and Mel's relationship because she's just not listening to him, and he just keeps hounding her. And then there's all these other things going on and horrifying things going on at the same time. And yeah, I found myself at one point in that scene, like, I'm like, wait, what's he doing there? I'm like, oh, we're still near the ballpark
Yeah.
doing this thing. Okay. Oh, now there's a lizard zapping him with a laser. Okay, cool. Awesome. Like, I'm following.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun. It's just constant chaos in this film.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a weird way, it kind of reminds me of the vignettes from the first movie,
Oh, interesting.
where just like that sense that like the story is being like fragmented and broken apart, and then you're trying to like kind of collect it all together in a coherent way, and it just feels kind of crazy, and it feels like you're like watching something like larger than like it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, definitely it's an interesting theme.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. I also noticed that just as we're talking about this, like the chaos of these films feels like it's kind of grounded or counterbalanced by the soundtrack. I mean, yeah, I feel like I keep going back to the sound because the sound, I just really resonate with the genre of music, and like especially when I was like really obsessing over Gregg Araki, like I was very into 90s shoegaze.
Oh yeah.
And I remember like in the acid or the Molly whatever,
Mm-hmm.
where they take the drugs and they play the hide and seek. There's this song by Seafeel, like Seefeel, that plays, and I remember like just the disorientation of James Duvall's character getting like turned around like a million times with this song that was like very familiar to me at the time, was really interesting. And I remember the film cut away to a different scenario with different characters, and then cut back, and another Seafeel song from the same album or something was playing, and I just appreciated that, like, if I really paid attention to the sound, that could kind of create this more coherent narrative. But
Interesting. Yeah.
I also did appreciate that, like, Gregg Araki really resists having a structured plot line, and the chaos is part of the experience of the film. I think it's pretty awesome how like delusions and like the imaginary are so important in how you understand the experiences of these characters. And with the lizards, you don't know if that's a hallucination and a way to reconcile with James Duval's unmet desire for Montgomery, or if it's real, and the boundary between the imaginary and the real being blurred is so important for this film.
Yeah. There's a very distinct line of like reality versus surrealism throughout the whole thing. And I love it. I think it also, like we were talking about earlier, I think the campy aspect of this film is so important because there is also a lot of like really disturbing content that was really shocking to me, and I wasn't expecting for the kind of happy, fun vibe that it initially starts with. And so I think, if it didn't have the classic Gregg Araki blend of like camp, funny, and dark, terrible things, then I would not appreciate the film as much as I did, if that makes
For
sense.
sure, yeah. I mean, I think the violence in this movie is to me it was pretty distinct from the other ones in that it's a lot
Yeah.
more like severe and dark, and like the characters' reactions to it are also a lot more severe and serious.
Yeah.
And like in Doom Generation, they kind of just laugh it off, or they're like, "Oh, that was weird."
Yeah, they're like,
And
"Want a Dorito?" Yeah.
yeah, whereas in this one, it's really like someone is being really deeply disturbed, and the camp comes from, I think, the jarringness of like, you're going from like everything is totally fine and just like sarcastic, and then somebody's like beating someone's head in with like a tomato soup can, and then there's like tomato soup everywhere, but also like the characters are like crying, and like clearly there's this like insane fight, and it's just like it's a very different, more, I think, disturbing way to do it, and it's interestingly still manages to make it like funny in a certain way. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely, I think it's heavier than Doom Generation,
For
other than the
sure.
castration scene, but that's separate.
Right. But I do agree. I think this film kind of lingers on it more than Doom Generation. Like Doom Generation is kind of the like, oh shit, that just happened. Well, the movie's over.
Mhm.
And this one, it kind of forces you to sit in like the discomfort and the trauma and pain of its characters a lot more, in a way which made it more close to like thematically to Totally Fucked Up,
Yeah.
but like totally different visual style as at the same time.
Mhm.
So
I'm thinking about that scene. There's this subplot that happens where I am bad with the characters' names, but there's the girl and the Baywatch guy
Egg.
are like going
oh
off.
yes,
Egg,
Egg.
yeah.
Yeah.
Egg and the Baywatch man are on this little like date, and then it really quickly turns like very creepy and violent. And then she goes back, and then she's dead later, and like really doesn't
Yeah.
explain what
Yeah.
happened between. But it's interesting that basically isn't referred to, if I'm not mistaken. That's like entirely isolated from the rest of the plot, and it's the only like distinctly like heterosexual thing going on in every way,
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's so separate. And the only connection that it really makes is um I can't remember which character it is, but her brother is with
Mm.
them at the
Yeah, you're
party.
right.
And he like also tries to harm himself or something. He dives into the pool and Christina Applegate's character saves him. Love her. But yeah, and you're kind of just like, wait, what just happened? Because we don't really know those characters very well. Well, at least not him. We definitely get a good look into Egg and who she is, I would say. And that scene was really interesting. I mean, I hated that whole aspect of the film. It definitely was something I didn't really want it to have, but I think it is at the same time important and makes sense because I kind of felt like it was a kind of criticism of violence within religion in a way, like the violence of religion, because we have her character and she's just been assaulted, and then we have this other character who's really struggling with addiction, and they're in the midst of like this other main plot with James Duvall's character. We're seeing these side plots with these two over and over again, and in the kind of culmination of it all, we're watching them watch this creepy televangelist on their TVs
Yeah.
at home after they've just experienced like some of the most horrible, probably the most traumatic moments of their lives. And we watched this televangelist essentially convince them to kill themselves because he keeps talking about the beauty and bliss of heaven and like is really targeting people who are struggling. And I just thought that was really interesting because that's obviously a really bold kind of statement to make in the midst of everything else that's going on. And I'm really curious. I want to read up on it more. I'm really curious like why Gregg Araki did that and what his kind of like views on religion are, especially in the context of a queer person.
Definitely. And I mean, it is a big thing, like Doom Generation. There's this whole, the Rapture is coming, and there's the
Right.
666 every time that they buy anything. And like, there is this fixation on Christian symbolism and demons and devils and heaven and the afterlife. And it very much associate Doom Generation, I think, very clearly associates like kind of queerness and counterculture with like hell and demons. And I
Right.
mean, this movie pretty directly associates this like kind of like very straight cis white girl with heaven and God. And it's interesting that this is definitely, I mean, it does definitely play a role.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's like a inbuilt homophobia in a lot of religion, and so I think being aware of that for Gregg Araki is implicit, but
Yeah.
yeah, he's making it like making the connection to violence is, I think, really interesting for him.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't notice the significance of religion in this part of the film and how that ad on the TV that comes up is really important in portraying this kind of apocalyptic feeling that these teens are facing in the face of trauma and sexual abuse and addiction, and how these are things that like we can't in the social structure of our world understand as anything but an end. And I don't know, I guess the scene with Egg was really disturbing, and
Yeah.
the first time that I watched this film I had to skip through that because I couldn't watch it. And it was interesting seeing it for the second time now and not skipping through it, because I realized that it didn't capture as much of the implicit rape and physical abuse as I thought that it would. And I thought it was interesting that Gregg Araki was kind of asking us to fill in the blanks. Like, we've heard this story before. We know that this is an inevitable part of the system of heterosexuality, is the exploitation of women, and we can fill in these incoherent gaps in the narrative. And I think like the religion in relation to that is interesting because Egg comes back and she's sitting on her bed and this ad comes up, and it's almost like the opposite of an incomplete narrative. It's like this person is speaking to her and telling her these messages that are so overdetermined, so deterministic, telling her like, this is your fate. When you die, this will happen, and this is your end, and I can promise you that this is your end. I think it's interesting that there's a lot of tension there between like the incoherent narrative and these propaganda messages, and also just like how heterosexuality is also institutionalized through religion and like Western systems of religion.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, it's an interesting point, the kind of ambiguity and incoherence that he presents around the actual assault and the actual the actual physical act he doesn't show. And in other movies he definitely has shown this isn't, I think, this is a very like direct stylistic choice to leave this
Right.
unknown and kind of unanswered. And I think, I mean, it's interesting. I'm trying to connect it to the kind of queer experience that the rest of the movie is talking about, and how
Mm-hmm.
here it's like this was supposed to be kind of the ultimate heterosexual experience, and like the idea of the like perfect movie star man like finds this like selects this like pretty girl from the cafe, it's kind of this ideal
Right.
environment, and then to introduce this like deep ambiguity and uncertainty and pain and violence and incoherence and all of these things that he'd previously been associating with the queer experience, to associate that with like sexual violence and heterosexuality, and then to then give this answer of like, oh, we have God and we have religion to give us the answers and make things make sense. I think it captures an interesting like other side that he doesn't usually talk about, of like how the heterosexual experience so often involves kind of forcing ourselves to fill in the gaps and forcing ourselves, finding some way to make things not ambiguous and make things very clearly labeled and demarcated and unambiguous.
Yes.
And there is this very implicit violence in that act that he kind of symbolizes with the suicide, and finding containment in like death, and the other characters just kind of float in limbo as this is happening, and they're just kind of high on drugs and drifting around and watching death happen and experiencing it, but not like answering it and not like giving any clear kind of conclusions to any of it.
Yeah.
Definitely an interesting juxtaposition
Yeah.
to give.
Yeah, this movie, there's a lot to talk about in this film. All of these movies, honestly, but I think all three are worth watching. Are there any final thoughts on Nowhere?
I don't think so. I mean, this one, I don't know if I have anything concluding to say. Like it was really interesting. It's interesting positioning this as the conclusion to this trilogy, because this one really does amp up a lot of the other, amps up the absurdity and it amps up the campiness so much. And like that's really fun, but it's definitely not, it doesn't have the traditional kind of like concluding feeling
Oh
to
yeah.
it. And I mean, especially the ending just being another kind of like failure, another upset is, I mean, it's in line with the others, but yes, very
Yeah.
harsh tone to take.
It
And he's kind of
really,
cementing that with this.
yes, exactly. It really drives home the doomed generation narrative,
Mhm.
or theme. I mean, we literally see Dark, James Bell's character, do another video diary, like call back to Andy, and totally fucked up.
Dear diary, what a day. I swear I've never been so depressed, miserable, and lonely in my entire life. It's like I know there's got to be somebody out there somewhere. Just one person in this huge, horrible, unhappy universe who can hold me in their arms and tell me everything's going to be okay. And how long do I have to wait before that person shows up? I feel like I'm sinking deeper and deeper into quicksand, watching everyone around me die a slow, agonizing death. It's like we all know, way down in our souls, that our generation is going to witness the end of everything. You can see it in our eyes. It's in mine. Look. I'm doomed. I'm only 18 years old and I'm totally doomed.
It's bleak. It just goes right back to its roots in a way. It kind of does come full circle, but the full circle is also incomplete at the same time. You're like, oh,
Mhm.
well, we didn't come home, even if we kind of did. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, exactly.
No,
Yeah.
and I really appreciate that in all three of the films, the ending involves this unmet desire and misrecognition, and the illusion of your desire and love being sustained and reciprocated in the way that like religion frames heterosexuality as this end where like the man selects the woman and she is his trophy and he finds his power through her exploited value, like in a very symbolic way. Like I just appreciated that Gregg Araki really resisted that narrative of anything being complete and finished, and we're always kind of left with this feeling of the desire for more and also this lack of desire, like I don't want to see more, this is too intense.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of a relief when it all ends in quite the jaw-dropping ending, might I add. I don't even know if I want to spoil it on here because I think it's such a big piece of the film. I mean, my jaw was literally on the floor. So, for our listeners, I hope that intrigues you if you haven't seen this film to go check it out. You can watch it right now on Canopy as well, but also all three of these are on the Criterion channel, and there's even the commentary video or commentary versions where you get some commentary from Gregg Araki and others, and it's really beautiful stuff. So if you're interested, definitely check that out. But unfortunately, it's time to wrap on Gregg Araki's Teenage Apocalypse trilogy. We started with Totally Fucked Up, then on to the Doom Generation, and ended nowhere, literally. Gregg Araki once said, "My movies are for the outsiders and the weirdos and the punks and the queers. They're for the people that don't really fit in." And I think it's why the films have resonated all these years. And I really couldn't agree more. And just want to say thank you, Gregg, for giving us a culture and community and a place in this world. He really defined the culture for our doomed generation and shed some light, gave us some light in the dark. And I think everyone can really take away something from his work. And I think his filmography is maybe more important than ever today. Things are pretty crazy out there right now. This week has definitely been very difficult for LA and the rest of the country. So I do just want to take a moment to shout out to our LGBTQ and immigrant communities. We love you guys so much and we support you. And hopefully we can all find some peace and joy in these tough times. And I feel like these movies really help transport us out of our reality and into another, even if it's equally dark or crazy or fun, and even just for a couple hours. And, I think that escape can be really powerful. And, the power of cinema, it's what we're always talking about here. But anyways, Melia and Henry, thank you guys so much for joining me on the podcast today. It was a joy to have you here.
Of course. Thank you for having us on. That was so fun.
I'm glad. Yeah. And we hope that you listeners enjoyed our deep dive into this incredible and dense trilogy. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the films. Scroll on down to the episode description and hit the send us a text link. We'll read your thoughts on the podcast, or, you can also reach us on Instagram at Gimme3Podcast. That's just GIMME, spell out 3 podcast. And really quickly, if you love the podcast and you want to support the show even more, 2 really small things that go a long way is setting our episodes to auto download on Spotify, or you can subscribe to our Patreon for just $5 a month to get some spoiler-free bonus episodes. So you can find the link to subscribe in the episode description below as well. Thank you again for joining us on the Gimme 3 podcast, and we'll see you at the movies.